I, Sarah, 27 years old, stood frozen in the doorway of my greenhouse. Glass shattered across the floor, rare plants trampled to death, irrigation system torn apart. My $22,000 investment, 5 years of savings and dreams, completely destroyed. My brother Tyler, 32, stood there with a defiant smirk. "You need to grow up," he said. Then my parents arrived, putting their arms around him, telling me to forgive him because he was just trying to teach you responsibility. They had no idea what lesson I was about to teach all of them. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had family betray you, and subscribe to follow my journey to justice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Plants had been my passion since I was 7 years old. While other kids wanted toys or video games, I begged for seedlings and gardening tools. By age 10, I had transformed our backyard corner into a miniature garden that neighbors would compliment. My mother seemed proud then, often bringing her friends to see my little green sanctuary. My father would ruffle my hair and call me his little botanist. Those memories make what happened later even more painful. Everything changed when Tyler moved back home after dropping out of college. He was 22, I was 17, and suddenly all attention shifted to helping Tyler find his path. My parents redirected funds they'd saved for my college education to support Tyler's series of failed business ventures, a detail I only discovered years later. My achievements, straight A's, scholarship offers, science fair wins, became background noise in the family's new mission to support Tyler through his difficult time. Despite the shift in family dynamics, I remained determined. I graduated high school with honors and secured a partial scholarship to State University's prestigious botany program. I worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a local nursery and evening waitressing, to cover the remaining tuition and living expenses. Those 4 years were exhausting but fulfilling. I graduated summa cum laude with a dual degree in botany and agricultural business, already formulating plans for my future rare plant nursery business. Tyler's jealousy manifested in subtle sabotage throughout our lives. When I was 16, he accidentally spilled chemicals on my science fair project the night before judging. I stayed up all night recreating it and still won second place. During my college application season, my carefully crafted essays mysteriously disappeared from the family computer. Tyler suggested I must have forgotten to save them properly. I rewrote everything in a frantic weekend and still got accepted. Throughout my college years, Tyler would comment that I was wasting time playing in dirt while he was pursuing real business opportunities. Though these opportunities never seemed to materialize into actual success, my parents consistently excused his behavior. "Your brother is just finding himself," they'd say. Or, "Tyler expresses his feelings differently." The pattern was clear: Tyler could do no wrong, and I was expected to understand, accommodate, and forgive whatever he did. After college, I moved back to my parents' property, not by choice, but by financial necessity. The 5-acre family property had a small guest house where I could live rent-free while saving for my greenhouse. Moving home meant enduring Tyler's constant presence, as he'd never left, but the financial math made sense. Every dollar saved on rent meant reaching my greenhouse goal faster. For 3 years, I worked at Richardson's Garden Center as their rare plant specialist while building my expertise, client connections, and savings. I lived minimally, no vacations, few new clothes, meal prepping instead of eating out. Every spare dollar went into my greenhouse fund. When Tyler bought a new car or the latest gaming system, I remained focused on my goal. When he mocked my boring life, I visualized the business I was building. Finally, after 5 years of saving, planning, and research, I had the $22,000 needed to build my dream, a 16 by 40-foot commercial-grade greenhouse with automated climate control, specialized irrigation systems, and grow lights. I spent months researching the best materials and equipment, finding deals without compromising quality. The construction took 3 weeks, and I documented every step on my small but growing social media accounts. The day the greenhouse was completed was the proudest day of my life. My collection included rare specimens that took years to acquire. The variegated Monstera deliciosa that cost $600 and took 8 months to find. The black bat flower, Tacca chantrieri, that only specialty collectors typically grow. The ghost orchid, Dendrophylax londinii, that even experienced botanists struggled to keep alive. Each plant represented not just monetary value, but years of knowledge, care, and patience. The greenhouse wasn't just a hobby, it was the foundation of my business plan. I had already secured pre-orders from serious collectors and local high-end interior designers. My business plan projected breaking even within 18 months and showing significant profit by year 3. This wasn't playing with dirt as Tyler called it, this was a serious business venture built on expertise and market research. The weekend everything changed. I had been invited to attend the Regional Botanical Society conference 3 hours away. It was a significant professional opportunity, a chance to network with suppliers, meet potential clients, and attend workshops on the latest horticultural techniques. I had arranged for a neighbor's daughter, Amy, to water my plants that Saturday, but she called Friday night with a sudden fever. Since the irrigation system was automated and most plants could manage one day without additional care, I decided to still attend the conference and return Saturday evening instead of staying overnight as originally planned. That Saturday at the conference, I received an industry award for a research paper I'd published on propagation techniques for endangered native species. Several potential business partners exchanged information with me. I left the conference early, around 4 p.m., feeling both accomplished and eager to get back to my plants. The 3-hour drive felt longer than usual, anticipation building as I thought about applying new techniques I'd learned. I arrived home just after 7 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the property as I walked toward my greenhouse. From a distance, something looked wrong. The silhouette seemed different, jagged in places it should be smooth. As I got closer, my pace quickened, a sense of dread building in my stomach. Then I saw it, shattered glass catching the last rays of sunlight, twinkling like cruel stars. The door hung askew on broken hinges. I broke into a run. The destruction inside the greenhouse was methodical, not random. This wasn't a storm or accident, this was deliberate devastation. Every shelf had been overturned. Specialized pots lay shattered, their rare occupants uprooted and trampled. The irrigation control panel had been pried from the wall, its wires cut and tangled. Grow lights were smashed, glass and bulb fragments mixing with spilled soil. My careful organization system, labeled sections for propagation, mature specimens, and client orders, was unrecognizable. In the center of it all stood Tyler, a garden shovel still in his hand. He didn't try to leave or hide when I entered. Instead, he stood taller, his posture defensive but proud. The smirk on his face made my blood run cold. "What have you done?" My voice came out as a whisper, my body unable to produce more volume through the shock. "What needed to be done," Tyler replied, dropping the shovel with a clang that echoed through the destroyed space. "This plant obsession has gone far enough. You need to grow up and get a real job like everyone else." The shock began transforming into rage, building like pressure in a sealed container. A real job? This is my real job. This was my business, my future. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? I moved toward him, stepping over broken glass and murdered plants. That Monstera alone cost $600. The irrigation system was custom built. That's exactly the problem, Tyler scoffed. Normal people don't spend thousands on leaves and dirt. Mom and Dad have been enabling your little hobby long enough. Enabling? I was screaming now. I paid for every cent of this myself. 5 years of saving, working 2 jobs through college. Unlike you, who's been living off them since you dropped out. Tyler's face darkened. You've always thought you're better than me with your fancy degree and plant knowledge. Always the perfect daughter while I'm the screw-up, right? Well, now you've got nothing to be so superior about. I lunged toward him, years of resentment fueling my movement, but the sound of a car door slammed me back to reality. Our parents had arrived, likely hearing the shouting from the main house. They entered the greenhouse, faces shifting from confusion to shock as they took in the destruction. I waited for outrage on my behalf. Waited for them to yell at Tyler, to demand he explain himself, to show a fraction of the horror I was feeling. Instead, my father put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Son, I think you went a bit far here." "A bit far? A bit far?" My entire greenhouse was destroyed. "But," my father continued, his voice dropping into the serious tone he used for life lessons, "I understand what you were trying to do." I couldn't have heard him correctly. What he was trying to do? "Dad, look around. He destroyed everything I built." My mother stepped carefully through the debris to reach me. "Honey, we've been worried about your obsession with these plants. All this money spent, all this time alone in this greenhouse instead of building a real career or meeting someone nice." I stepped away from her reaching hand. "This is my real career. I have clients already. I was going to break even in 18 months. I just won an award today at the botanical conference." "Awards don't pay mortgages," my father said firmly. "Tyler was trying to help you see reality, even if his method was excessive." Tyler stood straighter under our father's hand, vindication washing over his features. "You've been living in a fantasy world, Sarah. Someone needed to wake you up." "This is tough love," my father added. "Sometimes a harsh lesson is the only kind that sticks." My mother nodded. "We've been enabling your plant hobby too long. Tyler just wants what's best for you, for your future." I felt like I was drowning, struggling for air in a room suddenly devoid of oxygen. The three of them stood together on one side of the destruction, a united front, while I stood alone on the other side, surrounded by the shattered remains of my dreams. "You need to forgive your brother," my mother said softly. "He was just trying to teach you responsibility." "Forgive him? Forgive him?" The words echoed in my head, incomprehensible, impossible. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat silently, moving food around my plate while my parents and Tyler carried on conversation as if nothing had happened. As if my world hadn't just been shattered along with my greenhouse glass. "The Henderson Company is hiring office staff," my mother mentioned casually. "Sarah, I could put in a word with Linda from my book club. Her husband is in management there." Tyler nodded approvingly. "See? A real job with benefits and normal working hours. Much better than playing gardener." I excused myself before dessert, claiming a headache. As I climbed the stairs to my room in the guest house, I overheard their continued conversation through the open dining room window. "Do you think she'll actually apply for real jobs now?" my mother asked. "She needed this wake-up call," my father replied firmly. "Tyler, I know your methods were extreme, but sometimes that's what it takes to break through delusion." "I just want my sister back in the real world," Tyler's voice carried, performatively concerned. "She'll thank me someday." In my room, I finally broke down. Tears came in violent waves, my body shaking with sobs and rage. 5 years of work, thousands of dollars, countless hours of research and care, all gone in one afternoon of destructive entitlement. And my parents, the people who should have protected me, were congratulating my destroyer. The next morning, I confronted my parents in the kitchen. "I want Tyler to pay for the damages. The greenhouse cost $22,000 to build and stock." My parents exchanged concerned glances. "Sarah," my father started carefully, "insurance should cover the structure damage." "It won't," I replied flatly. "I called the insurance company this morning. Damage caused intentionally by family members is excluded from coverage." "Well," my mother hedged, "Tyler doesn't have that kind of money right now. He's between opportunities." "Then you pay for it," I demanded. "Since you approve of what he did." My father's face hardened. "We did not approve of the destruction itself. But we will not pay for rebuilding something that was distracting you from a proper career path." "This is unbelievable," I whispered, looking between them. "If I had destroyed something of Tyler's, you'd have made me work 3 jobs to replace it." "That's different," my mother said weakly. How? How is it different? Neither answered. They didn't need to. We all knew how it was different. It had always been different. Tyler was the son who could do no wrong. I was the daughter expected to understand, accommodate, and forgive. The final blow came when Tyler sauntered into the kitchen, poured himself coffee, and winked at me. Looking at job listings yet, sis? I hear accounting is stable. I walked out before I could say or do something unforgivable. But in that moment, something crystallized within me. This wouldn't stand. I would not forgive and forget. I would not move on. I would find a way to balance the scales, to make them understand exactly what they had done. They wanted to teach me a lesson? Fine. Class was now in session. The first week after the destruction, I moved through life like a ghost. I went through the motions at my job at Richardson's Garden Center, grateful that Mr. Richardson allowed me time off when the tears became too much. I avoided family dinners, claiming shifts that didn't exist. At night, I cataloged every lost plant, every piece of equipment, documenting the full extent of the destruction with clinical precision. My rare variegated Monstera deliciosa, gone. The black bat flower I'd nursed from a temperamental seedling, destroyed. The ghost orchid that had finally produced its ethereal bloom after 2 years of specialized care, trampled. The corpse flower bulb that had been a graduation gift from my favorite professor, broken beyond saving. Each loss felt like losing a piece of myself. But grief and documentation were only the beginning. As the initial shock subsided, a cold, calculating clarity took its place. If my family wanted to teach me about the real world, I would show them exactly how the real world works. Actions have consequences. Destruction has costs. Betrayal leaves marks that can't be washed away with platitudes about forgiveness. I started by researching family property laws. Our 5-acre property had been in the family for generations, passed down from my grandfather to my father. I had always assumed it was simply family land, but legal ownership would be documented somewhere. The county records office website was my first stop, followed by a visit in person where I requested copies of all documents related to our property. What I discovered sent a jolt of electricity through me. The property hadn't been a simple inheritance. My grandfather had left a detailed will with specific provisions. The main house and 3 acres went to my father, yes, but there was language about the remaining 2 acres, the section that included my greenhouse location, being held in trust for future generations. The language was vague, but it opened possibilities I hadn't considered. I called my college friend Emily, now a practicing attorney specializing in family law. Over coffee at a cafe far from my parents' property, I laid out the situation. "This is beyond dysfunctional," Emily said after hearing the full story. "And legally, you might have more leverage than you realize." We pored over the property documents together. Emily pointed out clauses I'd missed, legal terminology that could be interpreted multiple ways. "Your grandfather's language about the 2 acres being preserved for the horticultural pursuits of future generations could be argued to mean you specifically, especially given your education and career path." "My parents never mentioned any of this," I said, staring at the papers. "They might not fully understand the implications themselves," Emily suggested. Or they deliberately kept it from me," I finished, a new wave of betrayal washing over me. Emily squeezed my hand. "Let me do some more research." "Don't confront them yet. Information is power, Sarah." While Emily explored the legal angles, I began investigating another aspect of our family dynamics, finances. Tyler's constant flow of money for his business ventures had to come from somewhere. Our parents were comfortable but not wealthy. Dad's construction management job and Mom's part-time work at the library provided a middle-class lifestyle, not endless funds for failed entrepreneurial attempts. I started with casual conversations with family friends, neighbors who'd known us for years. "Tyler's new car is nice," I mentioned to Mrs. Daniels next door. "Must have cost a fortune." "Your parents remortgaged the house last year, didn't they?" she replied. "Such a shame at their age, but they'd do anything for that boy." Piece by piece, a picture emerged. My parents had been systematically sacrificing their financial security to fund Tyler's lifestyle. The college fund originally meant for both of us had gone entirely to him, then additional funds when he dropped out. The family vacation property in Maine, sold 3 years ago. Mom's inheritance from Grandma, invested in Tyler's failed food truck concept. The house, remortgaged twice. Meanwhile, Tyler had been hiding massive credit card debt. I discovered this by pure chance, an overheard phone conversation as he argued with a creditor on the back porch, thinking no one was home. Further investigation revealed collection notices in the mail, quickly intercepted by Tyler. Online shopping packages arriving daily. A lifestyle completely disconnected from his non-existent income. I created a detailed spreadsheet documenting everything: dates, amounts, sources of funds given to Tyler, and his subsequent failures to turn any of it into success. The financial support contrasted starkly with my own experience, working through college, saving for years, building my business plan with careful research. The financial investigation led to another disturbing discovery. Family heirlooms had been disappearing over the past few years: grandmother's silver service, grandfather's watch collection, antique furniture pieces. Items of both sentimental and monetary value, gone without explanation. My mother had mentioned decluttering when I asked about the missing china cabinet, but the pattern was suspicious. A visit to local pawn shops confirmed my suspicions. 3 establishments recognized Tyler's photo. Yes, he'd been a regular customer, bringing in family items he'd inherited. The silver tea set had fetched $3,200 just 2 months ago. My evidence file grew thicker. Property documents, financial records, pawn shop receipts. I purchased a small hidden camera and placed it in the family living room, capturing conversations when I wasn't present. The recordings were revealing: my parents discussing Tyler's temporary financial setbacks, strategizing how to help him while keeping me in the dark, expressing relief that my plant phase might be over after the greenhouse incident. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Richardson, my boss, mentioned that a customer had come looking for me specifically, a botanical collector who'd heard about my propagation success with rare species. He was very disappointed to hear about your greenhouse, Richardson said. Said he'd been planning to place a substantial order. The business I'd been building was real. The clients were real. The future I'd planned wasn't a fantasy or hobby. It was a viable career path that had been violently derailed by my brother's jealousy and my parents' complicity. With each piece of evidence gathered, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about justice, about consequences proportional to actions. This was about teaching my family the very lesson they thought they were teaching me: that the real world doesn't reward destructive behavior, that relationships require respect, that trust once broken exacts a heavy cost to rebuild. Emily called with her legal assessment. The property situation is complicated but promising. The trust language your grandfather used gives you grounds to petition for formal recognition of your right to those 2 acres. It won't be quick or easy, but you have a case. What's my next step? I asked. Keep gathering evidence, especially about the greenhouse destruction. Document everything. But Sarah, she paused, are you sure you want to pursue this? It will change your family dynamics forever. I thought about the greenhouse ruins I still couldn't bear to fully clean up. About 5 years of savings destroyed in an afternoon. About the plants that had been like living embodiments of my dreams. About the forgive him that came instead of justice. My family dynamics changed the moment they defended what Tyler did, I said firmly. I'm just making sure everyone understands exactly what that means. My plan was taking shape. Not a single explosive confrontation, but a carefully orchestrated series of revelations that would force my family to face reality. Tyler's financial deceptions exposed. My parents' enabling patterns documented. The property rights they'd concealed brought to light. The legal and financial consequences of destroying my business made unavoidable. Phase 1 would begin tomorrow. I would present a calm facade, appear to be moving on. I would consider their suggestions about real jobs. And behind that mask of compliance, I would set in motion the machinery of proportional justice. The first small victory came unexpectedly. Dr. Mara, a botanist I'd met at the conference, reached out after hearing about the greenhouse destruction through industry contacts. "What happened is unforgivable," she wrote. "I'd like to donate specimens from my personal collection when you're ready to rebuild. Your work is too important to be derailed by this setback." Seeds of hope amid the destruction. I allowed myself a small smile as I added her email to my evidence file. My greenhouse was gone, but my knowledge, connections, and determination remained intact. This was just the beginning. Monday morning, I walked into the kitchen wearing office-appropriate attire instead of my usual jeans and botanical-themed t-shirts. My mother nearly dropped her coffee mug. "I'm interviewing at Henderson Company today," I announced casually. "The administrative position you mentioned." The shock on their faces was worth the uncomfortable pencil skirt. My father recovered first, clearing his throat. That's wonderful, Sarah." A step in the right direction. Tyler, slouched over his cereal, smirked. "Finally joining the real world, huh?" I forced a neutral expression. "We'll see how it goes." What I didn't mention was that Henderson Company had rejected Tyler's application 3 years ago. I knew this because my research had uncovered a pattern of Tyler beginning interviews full of confidence and ending them with bridges thoroughly burned. Henderson specifically had a note in their system about him, something I discovered through Linda's husband from Mom's Book Club, who was indeed in management there. The interview went perfectly. My office skills from managing the garden center's inventory system transferred well. My degree impressed them. My references from Richardson's were impeccable. By Friday, I had the job, administrative assistant to the marketing department, with benefits and growth potential. At dinner that night, I announced my new position. My parents beamed with approval. Tyler offered half-hearted congratulations, his eyes narrowing slightly. He hadn't expected me to succeed where he had failed. "Henderson," he mused. "Isn't that where that uptight Jason Mercer works?" "Jason Mercer is the marketing director," I confirmed. "My new boss, actually." Tyler's fork clattered against his plate. "That guy had it out for me during my interview." Complete jerk. "Really?" "He seems very professional," I replied mildly. "He mentioned they're quite selective about company culture and team fit." The implication hung in the air. Tyler had been rejected for a reason. I had been accepted for a reason. The first small shift in our family's perception was taking place right at the dinner table. My job at Henderson served multiple purposes. The regular income helped rebuild my savings. The office environment gave me distance from the family property and the greenhouse ruins I couldn't bear to see daily. Most importantly, it put me in contact with people who knew Tyler professionally, including Melissa from accounting, who had worked with him during his brief stint at Dawson Enterprises 2 years ago. Coffee breaks with Melissa yielded valuable information. "Your brother worked in sales for maybe 3 months," she told me. Charming at first, but then things went missing. Sample products, petty cash, even personal items from desks. Nothing could be proven directly, but after he left, the disappearances stopped. Each piece of information joined my growing file. Tyler's pattern extended beyond our family: charm, deception, taking what wasn't his, facing no consequences. 2 weeks into my new job, I executed the next phase of my plan. I called our family financial advisor, Mr. Winters, who had managed my parents' investments for decades. "I'm concerned about my parents' retirement planning," I explained. "With the recent home renovation costs and helping Tyler with his business ventures, I'm worried they're overextended." Mr. Winters' pause spoke volumes. "Sarah, I've been trying to have this conversation with your parents for over a year. Their withdrawals have been concerning. The college fund is depleted. The retirement accounts are down 40% from where they should be at their age." They mentioned helping Tyler with some credit card debt recently, I probed gently. Another telling pause. I'm not at liberty to discuss specific transactions, but I strongly encourage you to have your parents come in for a comprehensive review. Soon. The following Sunday, I accidentally left printouts of my own retirement account projections on the kitchen table, modest but growing steadily with my new job's 401k match. My father noticed them while reaching for the sports section. "You've already set up retirement contributions?" he asked, surprised. "Henderson has a great matching program," I replied. "Mr. Winters helped me optimize it. He mentioned he'd like to review your accounts too, actually. Said it's been a while." My mother glanced up sharply. "Did he say why?" "Just routine review, I think," I said casually. Though he did seem concerned about recent withdrawals. My parents exchanged loaded glances. My father folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. "We're fine, Sarah. Our finances are not your concern." Of course, I agreed easily. Just passing along the message. The seed was planted. That night, I heard them arguing in hushed tones in their bedroom. My mother's voice rose briefly, "How much more can we give him?" Before my father shushed her. The next phase involved the missing family heirlooms. I waited until Tyler left for one of his frequent business meetings, actually poker games, as my investigation had uncovered. Then I approached my mother as she gardened. "Mom, do you know where Grandma's pearl necklace is? I thought it might be nice to wear to the Henderson corporate dinner next month." Her hands stilled in the soil. I put it somewhere safe. Let me think about it. And maybe Grandpa's cufflinks for Dad? They'd be perfect for a formal event." Color drained from her face. "Sarah, those items are, we decided to simplify. Declutter." I pressed further. "What about the silver service? For my birthday dinner maybe?" She stood abruptly, brushing dirt from her hands. "We gave those things to charity. Tax deduction." The lie hung between us. I nodded slowly. "I see. Which charity?" "I'd love to make a matching donation." "I don't remember offhand," she stammered. "Your father handled it." That evening, I left a printout on the kitchen counter, a receipt from Golden Pond showing Tyler had sold our grandmother's pearl necklace for $900 3 months ago. I made sure to be out when my mother found it, visiting Emily to update her on my progress. When I returned, the house was eerily quiet. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. My father sat stone-faced in his recliner, not really watching the baseball game flickering on the TV. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. "Is everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Tyler's moved back to his apartment in town," my father said stiffly. He felt it was time to be more independent. Translation: the first confrontation about the Pond heirlooms had occurred. Tyler had either left voluntarily to escape further questioning or been temporarily banished. Either way, the family facade was cracking. The next morning, I overheard my mother on the phone with Tyler. "We're not angry, we're just disappointed," she said, the eternal parental phrase. "If you needed money, you could have asked instead of taking family treasures." Tyler's response was audible even from where I stood, loud, defensive, angry. "I was going to buy them back. You never had a problem helping me before. This is Sarah's doing, isn't it? She's turning you against me." The blame shifting was predictable. So was my parents' response, immediate backpedaling, reassurances that they still supported him, promises to work through this as a family. That evening, my father approached me in the kitchen. "Sarah, about the pawn shop receipt." "Yes?" I kept my voice neutral, continuing to chop vegetables for my dinner. "How did you find that?" "I was looking for my birth certificate for HR paperwork and found a whole stack of receipts in the desk drawer. I only looked because I recognized Golden Pond's logo. I pass it on my way to work." Another lie, but a necessary one to protect my broader investigation. My father seemed to accept it, nodding slowly. "Your brother is going through a difficult time," he began, the familiar refrain. He sold our family heirlooms, Dad, I interrupted flatly. Items with sentimental value that can't be replaced. How is that excusable? It's not, he admitted, surprising me. But family forgives family. Like you all forgave him for destroying my greenhouse? My business? My dream? The words escaped before I could contain them. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was different. How? He had no answer, just as before. Just as always. The confrontation at the family dinner the following Sunday was spectacular. My mother had discovered her jewelry box had been systematically picked through, the diamond earrings from their 25th anniversary, gone. The emerald pendant from her mother, gone. Even her everyday gold chain, gone. Tyler arrived late, already defensive from the tense phone calls all week. He barely sat down before my mother confronted him. Did you take my jewelry too? Her voice wavered between anger and despair. What? No. I told you, I only took a few old things nobody was using. Tyler's denial was immediate and vehement. I silently placed another printout on the table, a collection of pawn receipts I'd gathered from 3 different shops, all with Tyler's signature, all for items matching my mother's missing jewelry. The color drained from his face. Where did you get those? The pawn shops keep records, Tyler, I said calmly. It's the law. What followed was chaos, Tyler's denials crumbling into excuses, my mother's tears, my father's uncharacteristic shouting. I sat quietly, watching the family dynamic I'd known my entire life fracture along fault lines that had always been there, just beneath the surface. I was going to buy everything back. Tyler insisted. I just needed some capital for my new business venture. It would have paid off 10 times over. What new business venture? My father demanded. You haven't mentioned any concrete plans in months. The truth was spilling out now, unstoppable. Tyler had no business plans. The meetings were poker games. The networking events were bars. The investment opportunities were gambling debts. The facade of Tyler the entrepreneur was crumbling before our eyes, revealing Tyler the con artist who had been playing his own family for years. As the argument reached fever pitch, I excused myself quietly. In my room, I reviewed my evidence file, updating it with notes from the evening's confrontation. Phase 1 had succeeded beyond expectations. The financial deception was exposed. The family's enabling pattern was laid bare. The double standard in how Tyler and I were treated was B. Phase 2 would address the greenhouse destruction directly. And the property rights my parents had concealed. For that, I needed the final legal research Emily was completing. As satisfying as tonight's revelations had been, they were just the opening move in a longer game. Justice, like the rarest orchids, required patience to fully bloom. Monday morning at Henderson Company started normally. I'd been working there for nearly a month now, finding unexpected satisfaction in the structured environment and clear expectations. My desk plants, small survivors from my collection that had been inside the house during the greenhouse destruction, thrived under the office fluorescence, drawing compliments from coworkers. The calm shattered at 11:30 a.m. when Tyler burst through the office doors, face flushed with anger. Heads turned throughout the open floor plan as he stormed toward my desk. You think you're so clever, he snarled, loud enough for the entire marketing department to hear. Turning them against me with your little investigation. I stood slowly, acutely aware of my coworker's stares. Tyler, this isn't the place. You've always been jealous of me, he continued, his voice rising. Always trying to make me look bad so you could be the favorite. The irony was staggering. I kept my voice measured. You need to leave. This is my workplace. Or what? You'll destroy my life like I destroyed your stupid plants? He knocked a framed certificate off my desk for emphasis, the glass cracking against the floor. Jason Mercer, my boss, emerged from his office at the commotion. Is there a problem here? No problem, Tyler sneered. Just having a chat with my sister about family loyalty. "Sir, I need you to leave immediately, or I'll call security," Jason said firmly. Tyler leaned closer to me, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "This isn't over. Whatever plants you have left, consider them dead." Security arrived within minutes, escorting a still shouting Tyler from the building. Jason insisted I take the rest of the day off, assuring me the incident wouldn't reflect poorly on my employment. "Family issues happen to everyone," he said kindly. But that behavior was completely unacceptable. I drove straight to the police station, Tyler's threat echoing in my mind. The officer who took my report was sympathetic but realistic. "We can document the workplace incident and the threat against your property," she explained. "But for a restraining order, you'll need to file a separate petition with the court." By Wednesday, I had a temporary restraining order requiring Tyler to stay 100 feet away from me, my workplace, and my personal property. When I presented the document to my parents that evening, their reaction was explosive. "A restraining order against your own brother?" My father's face flushed deep red. "Have you lost your mind?" "He threatened me at my workplace," I explained calmly. "He threatened to destroy what's left of my plants. After what he did to my greenhouse, I take that threat seriously." My mother collapsed into tears. "What will people think? The neighbors? Our friends? Family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't destroy $22,000 worth of property and get defended for it either," I countered. "But here we are." My father slammed his hand on the table. "That's it. I've had enough of this vendetta. If you're going to pursue legal action against your own brother, you can't live on this property anymore." I had anticipated this reaction, but the reality still stung. "You're evicting me for protecting myself? We're asking you to drop this destructive path and work toward family healing," my mother corrected through tears. "The choice is yours." "I see." I stood slowly. "I'll be out by the weekend." That night, I called Emily. "They're evicting me for getting the restraining order." "Perfect timing," she replied, surprising me. "I've completed the research on the property trust. Sarah, you need to move temporarily anyway, we're about to challenge their entire claim to that section of land." Emily's apartment became my temporary home, a cramped but safe space where I could regroup. Moving was physically and emotionally exhausting. Years of my life packed into boxes, the visible evidence of my family's rejection surrounding me in cardboard walls. On Saturday morning, while packing the last of my books, I broke down completely. Sitting on the floor of my nearly empty room, I sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. The magnitude of what was happening hit me all at once: the greenhouse destruction, the family betrayal, the ongoing battle for justice, the homelessness, the uncertainty. For a moment, giving up seemed easier. Drop the restraining order. Apologize for causing trouble. Accept the greenhouse loss as a life lesson. Return to the dysfunctional family dynamic I'd known all my life. Emily found me like that, having arrived to help with the final moving trip. She sat beside me on the floor, her attorney persona softening into the friend I'd known since freshman biology. "It's okay to feel this," she said simply. "What you're doing is incredibly hard." "Maybe it's not worth it," I whispered. "Maybe I should just let it go." "Do you remember what you told me when we started this?" Emily asked. "You said this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. About truth. About making sure actions have appropriate consequences." I nodded slowly, wiping tears with my sleeve. "The reason this hurts so much," she continued, "is because you're forcing a family system that's been dysfunctional for decades to finally face reality. That's painful for everyone involved, including you. But it's also necessary." Her words anchored me. This wasn't just about a greenhouse anymore. This was about decades of inequality, of Tyler's actions being excused while I was expected to understand. This was about my parents enabling destructive behavior while punishing responsible choices. This was about truth finally having its day. We finished packing in determined silence. As we carried the last boxes to Emily's car, Tyler's vehicle screeched into the driveway. He stayed in his car, technically honoring the restraining order's distance requirement, but revved the engine threateningly. "Ignore him," Emily advised. That's exactly why the restraining order was necessary. Back at the apartment, more bad news awaited. During my move, Tyler had entered my room and discovered my evidence folder, or at least part of it. The backup copies were safe with Emily, but Tyler now knew I had been investigating him systematically. He texted me gloating about destroying my little detective work, I told Emily, showing her the message. "He thinks he's won because he found one folder." "Let him think that," Emily advised. Meanwhile, I filed the initial paperwork regarding the property trust. "Your grandfather's intentions were clear. That section of land was meant for agricultural or horticultural use by future generations. Given your education and business plan, you have a strong claim." Despite Emily's confidence, I felt defeated. I was homeless, my greenhouse destroyed, my family relationships in tatters. The legal process would be lengthy and expensive. Meanwhile, Tyler seemed to be regaining our parents' support. They'd given him money to resolve some financial misunderstandings, according to texts my mother sent. That evening, scrolling mindlessly through my phone to distract from the despair, I received an unexpected message from Richardson, my former boss at the garden center. The Botanical Society members heard about what happened. They're outraged. "Many remember your grandfather's contributions to local conservation. Call me tomorrow, there's support you should know about." A small spark reignited. I wasn't alone in this fight. People who understood the value of what had been destroyed, who recognized the legitimacy of my work, were rallying. The horticultural community, my real community, was stepping up where my blood family had failed. The next day brought another surprise. A call from a number I didn't recognize turned out to be my father's brother, Uncle Robert. We had never been close. He and my father had some long-standing disagreement that predated my birth, but his voice was warm and concerned. "Sarah, I heard what happened from the Daniels next door. Your greenhouse, the eviction, all of it. I'd like to meet with you, if you're willing. There are things about the family property you should know, things your father never told you." Hope, tentative but persistent, bloomed like a stubborn seedling through concrete. The setbacks were significant, the challenges daunting. But new allies were emerging. New information was coming to light. The path forward was difficult but not impossible. That night, I added a new section to my reconstructed evidence file, unexpected support. The Botanical Society members. Uncle Robert. Richardson. Jason Mercer, who had defended me at work. Emily, whose apartment sheltered me. The officer who had taken my report seriously. For the first time since the greenhouse destruction, I felt something beyond anger and grief. I felt possibility. The greenhouse was gone, but the knowledge, connections, and determination that had built it remained. This was not the end of my story, just a difficult chapter in a longer narrative of growth, resilience, and ultimately, justice. Tomorrow, I would meet Uncle Robert and discover what secrets the family property still held. Uncle Robert suggested meeting at Riverside Park, neutral territory away from the family property and any potential encounters with Tyler. I arrived early, watching joggers follow the path along the water, feeling strangely disconnected from their normal Sunday routines. I barely recognized my uncle at first. It had been years since our last meeting at a distant cousin's wedding. He had more gray in his beard now, but the family resemblance to my father was unmistakable, the same tall frame and broad shoulders, though Robert's eyes held a warmth my father's had increasingly lacked. After awkward greetings and small talk about the weather, Uncle Robert got straight to the point. "Your greenhouse situation is inexcusable," he began. "But I'm not surprised. The way your father and mother have enabled Tyler's behavior for years, it's a pattern I've watched from a distance, unable to intervene." "You knew about their favoritism?" I asked, surprised that an outside observer had noticed what I'd thought was our family's private dysfunction. "It was obvious to everyone except them," he confirmed. But that's not why I asked to meet you. I'm here about the property, specifically, your grandfather's intentions for it. He pulled a folder from his messenger bag, handling the contents with reverence. Your grandfather, my father, was an avid conservationist and amateur botanist. Did you know that? I shook my head. No one ever mentioned that. Of course they didn't, Robert said with a sad smile. It didn't fit the narrative. Your father rejected everything about our upbringing, the environmental values, the botanical interests. He went into construction management almost as a rebellion. The revelation stunned me. My love of plants, which had always seemed like an inexplicable passion, suddenly had context. A genetic thread connecting me to a grandfather I'd barely known. The 5-acre property was my father's pride and joy, Robert continued. He had specific plans for how it would be used after his passing. The main house and 3 acres were for your father, yes. But the remaining 2 acres, the section where you built your greenhouse, were designated for agricultural or horticultural use by future generations. He handed me a document, a copy of an addendum to my grandfather's will, dated 2 months before his death. The language was clear: the eastern 2 acres, including the natural spring and southern exposure, shall be held in trust for the horticultural endeavors of my descendants who share my love of growing things. Your father was the executor of the will, Robert explained. He was legally obligated to honor this provision, but he never mentioned it to you, did he? Never, I whispered, scanning the document. But why would he hide this? It's literally written for someone like me. Because acknowledging the addendum would mean acknowledging that his daughter, not his son, inherited his father's values and passions, Robert said gently. Your father has been trying to reshape Tyler in his own image for years. Your success with plants, your connection to his father's legacy, it disrupts that narrative. Do you have the original document? I asked, legal implications immediately springing to mind. Better than that, Robert replied. I have the original, notarized copies of all documents, correspondence with the attorney who drafted them, and my own sworn statement as witness to our father's intentions. And I'm willing to testify if needed. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The document in my hands wasn't just leverage, it was vindication. Proof that my greenhouse, my business, my passion belonged on that land by design. By right. By my grandfather's explicit wish. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. You and Dad haven't spoken in years. Robert's expression softened. Because I see my father in you. His patience with growing things. His careful observation. His quiet determination. He would be devastated to see how your greenhouse was destroyed and how the family has treated you. I couldn't stand by any longer. We spent the next hour reviewing all the documentation. Every page strengthened my legal position. Combined with Emily's research, it created an undeniable case. The land beneath my destroyed greenhouse was rightfully mine, designated specifically for the exact purpose I had been using it. What happens next? I asked as we gathered the papers. That's up to you, Robert replied. You could pursue full legal separation of the property, force a formal division. Or you could use this as leverage for compensation for the greenhouse destruction. Either way, I'll support your decision. I returned to Emily's apartment with renewed determination and a clear path forward. The next morning, we drafted a formal letter to my parents, outlining the property trust provisions, including copies of the addendum, and requesting a family meeting with legal representation present. The response was immediate: panicked phone calls from both parents, messages ranging from anger to pleading. I let them all go to voicemail. This conversation would happen on my terms, with proper documentation and witnesses. The family meeting was set for Wednesday evening. Emily arranged for us to use a conference room at her law firm, neutral ground with appropriate professional atmosphere. My parents arrived first, looking uncomfortable in the formal setting. My father's face was a mask of controlled anger. My mother's eyes were red from crying. Tyler arrived last, slouching into a chair with affected nonchalance that didn't hide his nervousness. Uncle Robert sat beside me, a physical representation of family support I'd never experienced. Emily and her senior partner represented my legal interests. My parents had brought their own attorney, a silver-haired man who looked increasingly concerned as he reviewed the documents we provided. "Let's be clear about why we're here," Emily began professionally. Sarah's greenhouse, valued at $22,000, was deliberately destroyed by Tyler. When she sought compensation, she was instead evicted from the family property. Upon investigation, we discovered that the section of land where the greenhouse stood was specifically designated in Herbert Miller's will for horticultural use by his descendants. My father interrupted, "This is ridiculous. That addendum was never meant to be legally binding. It was just my father's wish, not an enforceable trust." His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Actually, Mr. Miller, the language here creates a clear testamentary trust. The addendum was properly executed, notarized, and witnessed. It's legally binding." The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked confused, turning to him. "James, you told me your father left the entire property to you without conditions." The first crack in their united front. My father shifted uncomfortably. "I simplified a complex legal situation." "You lied," she corrected, her voice small but clear. Tyler leaped into the growing silence. "This is all a technicality. Sarah abandoned the property anyway. She has no claim anymore." "Abandonment under duress after destruction of property doesn't invalidate her claim," Emily's senior partner interjected. "In fact, it strengthens our case for damages." The meeting continued for 2 hours, legal terms flying back and forth. Gradually, the reality sank in for my family. The land was legally mine. The greenhouse destruction was actionable. The eviction was improper. Their position was untenable. My parents' attorney finally requested a brief recess to confer with his clients. When they returned, my father's demeanor had changed, the anger replaced by resignation. "What do you want, Sarah?" he asked directly. "I want what's legally mine, the 2 acres designated in grandfather's will," I stated firmly. "I want compensation for the destroyed greenhouse and plants. And I want acknowledgement from all of you about what really happened, not excuses about teaching me responsibility or tough love." Tyler started to protest, but my father silenced him with a raised hand. For the first time, he was seeing the full consequences of their years of enabling Tyler's behavior. The financial cost. The legal complications. The family fractures that might never heal. "The land division will require formal surveying and deed adjustment," his attorney noted. "But it can be arranged." "As for compensation, I have savings," my mother interjected suddenly. "My personal account from before we were married. It should cover the greenhouse replacement." My father looked at her in shock. "Elizabeth, we don't have to." "Yes, we do," she interrupted with unexpected firmness. "We've been wrong, James. Horribly wrong." In that moment, something shifted. My mother, who had always followed my father's lead in family matters, was asserting her own judgment. She turned to me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in years. "I'm sorry, Sarah. What we did, what we allowed, was unforgivable." Tyler exploded from his chair. "This is insane. You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. It was just plants. Just a stupid hobby." "It was her business," my mother corrected. "Her future. Her passion. And you destroyed it because you were jealous." The blunt assessment hung in the air. Tyler stared at our mother, mouth open in shock at her betrayal. Then his eyes narrowed as he turned to me. "You turned them against me. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're manipulating everyone with your victim act and legal technicalities." "That's enough, Tyler," my father said wearily. "The evidence speaks for itself. The pond heirlooms. The credit card debt we covered. The destroyed greenhouse. The threats at Sarah's workplace. This pattern can't continue." It was the first time I had ever heard my father directly confront Tyler's behavior without excuses or deflection. Tyler seemed to deflate before our eyes, his sense of entitlement colliding with emerging accountability. As the meeting concluded, agreements in principle were established. The property would be legally divided according to the will's provisions. My mother's savings would compensate for the greenhouse. Tyler would be required to attend financial counseling and anger management therapy as conditions for continued family support. Outside the conference room, Uncle Robert squeezed my shoulder. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said simply. "Not just of what you're building, but of your strength in standing up for it." For the first time since the greenhouse destruction, I felt a weight lifting. Justice was taking shape. Not in the form of revenge or punishment, but in restoration, truth, and appropriate consequences. That evening, Uncle Robert made an unexpected offer. "I'd like to invest in your new greenhouse business," he said. "Partially because I believe it's a sound investment with your expertise. But mostly because it's exactly what my father, your grandfather, would have wanted." The turning point wasn't just legal or financial. It was the validation that my path had been right all along. My passion wasn't a hobby or phase or fantasy. It was my inheritance in the truest sense, a connection to a grandfather whose values had skipped a generation to find expression in my life and work. The property would be divided. The greenhouse would be rebuilt. And most importantly, the truth had finally emerged, clear and undeniable as a perfectly bloomed orchid. 1 year later, I stood in the center of my new greenhouse, a 24 by 60-foot state-of-the-art structure that made my original seem modest by comparison. Morning light filtered through the polycarbonate panels, illuminating rows of thriving rare specimens. The automated irrigation system hummed quietly, delivering precise amounts of water to each section. Temperature and humidity sensors monitored conditions, adjusting ventilation as needed. This wasn't just a replacement for what was lost, it was an evolution, a manifestation of hard-learned lessons and newfound strength. The construction had been completed 3 months ago on my legally established 2 acres of the family property. The formal division had taken 6 months of surveys, paperwork, and legal proceedings, but the result was undeniable. This land was mine, recorded at the county registry of deeds, with clear boundaries marked by surveyor stakes and a new fence. My rare plant business, officially named Heritage Botanicals in honor of my grandfather, had exceeded even my optimistic projections. The waiting list for my variegated specimens stretched months long. Interior designers from 3 states contracted me for special projects. The botanical magazine Green Legacy had featured my recovery story in their spring issue, bringing another wave of interested clients and industry connections. The business success was vindicating, but the personal growth was more profound. I had discovered reserves of strength I never knew existed. I had learned to set boundaries, to demand respect, to stand firm when justified. These weren't qualities I had ever associated with my plant-loving, conflict-avoiding self, yet they had been there all along, dormant seeds waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The family landscape had shifted dramatically as well. Tyler's financial house of cards had finally collapsed when my parents stopped providing unlimited bailouts. The credit card companies filed suits for unpaid balances. His car was repossessed. His apartment evicted him for non-payment. The constructed image of Tyler the successful entrepreneur had finally dissolved completely, revealing Tyler the struggling adult who had never developed actual responsibility or skills. My parents had attempted reconciliation in small, tentative steps. First came text messages checking on the greenhouse construction. Then a birthday card with a heartfelt, handwritten apology from my mother. Eventually, an invitation to dinner at a neutral restaurant, not the family home, where conversation remained cautious but civil. I maintained firm boundaries throughout. Forgiveness wouldn't be automatic or easy. Trust, once shattered, required more than apologies to rebuild. But I remained open to the possibility of a new, healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than the dysfunctional patterns of the past. My mother had changed the most. The revelation of my father's deception about the property trust had catalyzed a broader reassessment of their relationship dynamics. She had started therapy, begun part-time classes at the community college, and established financial independence with a separate account my father couldn't access. She was finding her voice after decades of deferring to others. My father's transformation was slower, more reluctant. His worldview had been fundamentally challenged. The son he'd favored and defended had proven destructive and deceitful, while the daughter he'd dismissed had built something substantial and valuable. These realizations didn't change his personality overnight, but they opened cracks in his certainty, creating space for new perspectives to take root. The most surprising development came 6 weeks ago, when Tyler appeared at the greenhouse entrance. Thinner, humbler, with none of his former swagger, he had stood awkwardly shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I need a job," he had said simply. "No one else will hire me with my history." The request stunned me. "You want to work for me? After destroying my first greenhouse?" "I have nowhere else to go," he admitted. "Mom and Dad are finally setting real conditions for their help. I need to show stable employment for 3 months before they'll consider letting me move back to the property." The irony was almost too perfect, Tyler needing my help, my business, my mercy. The tables had completely turned. I could have rejected him outright, a small revenge for all he had done. But that path offered nothing constructive. "I'll give you a chance," I decided after careful consideration. Entry-level position. Minimum wage. 3-month probationary period. 1 late arrival, 1 no-show, 1 instance of damaging property, you're done. No exceptions. "That's fair," he had agreed, eyes downcast. "And you'll be working under me, taking my direction, following my expertise. Can your ego handle that, Tyler?" He had nodded silently. The first weeks had been awkward. Tyler learning basic plant care, inventory systems, order processing. His natural charm served him well with customers, but the methodical, detail-oriented nature of horticultural work challenged his impatient tendencies. There were moments of frustration, tense conversations, nearly crossed boundaries. But gradually, unexpectedly, something shifted. Tyler began asking questions about the plants, genuine curiosity rather than obligatory interest. He started arriving early to help with morning waterings. He developed systems for tracking customer preferences that actually improved our follow-up sales. I wasn't naive enough to believe our relationship was healed or that Tyler had completely transformed. But watching him experience actual consequences, develop real skills, and earn genuine validation was its own form of justice, more constructive than any punishment I could have devised. My parents visited the greenhouse together for the first time last weekend. They walked through slowly, taking in the thriving business that had emerged from destruction. My mother touched plant leaves gently, asking questions, showing authentic interest. My father remained more reserved but nodded with grudging respect at the sophisticated systems and clear evidence of success. "We brought you something," my mother said finally, retrieving a small package from her purse. Inside was a black bat flower, the same rare specimen that had been destroyed in the original greenhouse. They had tracked it down through specialty growers, a process that must have taken considerable effort and expense. "We can never replace everything that was lost," my father said, the closest he had come to a direct apology. "But we wanted you to know we understand what this means to you now." The gesture wasn't everything, but it was something. An acknowledgement. A beginning. A small seed of possibility. The family dinner that evening felt different from any I could remember. We sat at my new dining table in the small cottage I'd built on my portion of the property. The power dynamics had fundamentally changed. We were meeting on my territory, eating food I had provided, admiring my accomplishments. Tyler served the dishes, his employee status now formalized even in family contexts. "Sarah's going to expand the greenhouse next spring," he mentioned during dinner, surprising me with his apparent support. "Adding a section specifically for endangered native species." "Is that true?" my mother asked. I nodded. Uncle Robert introduced me to a conservation group interested in partnership. We'll be propagating species threatened by development and climate change, then helping re-establish them in protected areas. Your grandfather would have loved that, my father said quietly. He was always talking about native plant conservation. I never had the patience for it. But Sarah does, my mother observed. She got that from him. The simple acknowledgement of my connection to my grandfather, of the legitimacy of my path, meant more than they could know. The greenhouse destruction had been devastating, but it had catalyzed a family reckoning long overdue. Truths suppressed for decades had finally emerged. Patterns established over generations had finally been challenged. As they prepared to leave, my father paused at the door. What you've built here, it's impressive, Sarah. A real business. I was wrong about that. From him, those words represented monumental growth. The journey from victim to business owner, from accommodation to advocacy, from silence to voice had transformed me in ways I was still discovering. The greenhouse, both its destruction and rebuilding, had become a powerful metaphor for resilience. Sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually a clearing of space for something stronger to grow. I still maintain boundaries with my family. Trust returned slowly, tested carefully with each interaction. Our relationships now exist within a framework of respect and consequences rather than enablement and excuse. Whether these healthier patterns will endure remains to be seen, but the foundation has been laid. The true lesson wasn't about revenge or even justice in the strictest sense. It was about standing firmly in your truth when others try to dismiss it. About recognizing your worth when others fail to see it. About building something meaningful even after devastation. And perhaps most importantly, about the power of proportional response, addressing wrongs without becoming what you oppose. Have you ever had to rebuild something important to you after a setback? How did you maintain your determination through the difficult times? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if my journey resonated with you, subscribe to follow my ongoing story of growth and resilience, and share with anyone who might need encouragement after facing their own greenhouse moments. Thank you for witnessing my journey from destruction to restoration. Remember, sometimes our greatest growth comes after our most painful pruning.